So, another day, another update with the Montreal Canadiens and their trade situation. We had ourselves a little segment done by TSN's Darren Dreger, who went out there and spoke on TSN 690 the other day about the Montreal Canadiens and where exactly things can go with them and their trade navigation. I'll leave a link in the description to this video on TSN's website. No trades are imminent as a potential roster crunch looms for the Canadiens. This was from November 22nd, so a few days ago. And I know what you might be thinking. Okay, wait a minute. The article's title says that no trades are imminent. What gives, Lego? Well, it does say that there is a roster crunch that is looming over for this Canadiens team, and that will definitely affect what the Canadiens decide to do later on. But if you scroll down into this article, and of course the video is there too, you had yourselves TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger, who appeared on TSN 690 to address potential trade rumors surrounding the Canadiens. What I can tell you is, teams that have struggled or are not quite what they thought they'd be, I'd certainly put Montreal in that group, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are even lower down the chain, but in that category, these two teams are having a lot of conversations. It makes sense that you would see a connection there. The Canadiens hold a 7-10-2 record, okay, this article is a few days old, and sit last place in the East with 16 points. The Penguins have 18 points and had a 7-10-4 record, sitting last in the Metro Division at that time. Penguins GM Kyle Dubas and company, the scouts of the Penguins, have been heavily scouting the Montreal Canadiens. Pittsburgh has some interesting pieces up front if you're the Canadiens. You see certain needs and there have to be long-term benefits. If you don't see the long-term benefits of a player and Pittsburgh has an interest in that player, maybe you take back an expiring contract, said Dreger. The Penguins have some expiring deals that aren't going to hurt you for the rest of the year. Maybe you need to get a sweetener where it makes some sense. I think there's a reason to connect Pittsburgh to Montreal. There's nothing close, nothing's imminent, but the fact that the Canadiens are getting healthy, maybe the time to strike with Pittsburgh or someone else will be there soon. So with this in mind, Darren Dreger straight up goes out there and connects Montreal and Pittsburgh as potential trade partners heading into the next little while here. Not like right away, but maybe soon. And if you go over to the Pittsburgh Penguins and you talk about some of the guys that are UFAs, guys that could be options for a Montreal Canadiens team, this is where you talk about some of the ideas that Darren Dreger talks about. How the Pens might have some expiring contracts that the Montreal Canadiens could go out there and acquire. Let's just go over to Puckpedia and take a look at the UFAs to be for this Penguins team. You've got Anthony Beauvillier, Drew O'Connor, Matt Nieto, and Jesse Puljujarvi on forward. On defense, you have Marcus Pettersson, Matt Gritslick, and Ryan Shea. Honestly, I don't think any of these guys really move the needle too much, but if you wanted to go for the ambitious route and maybe even the meme route, I say meme route because we have talked about this idea literally years ago on the YouTube channel. The guy who stands out in my mind the most is Jesse Puljujarvi, who is on an expiring $800,000 deal. Imagine getting Puljujarvi and bringing this guy to play with Patrik Laine. Does that not sound like a ridiculous, out-of-nowhere idea? Like, I get it, Puljujarvi has actually been not terrible for the Pittsburgh Penguins this season. There's probably not too much of an incentive to trade him away. He has 8 points in 20 games, that's on pace for about 32. But Jesse Puljujarvi, man, come on, for the memes. We did make a video about this all the way back in 2018. And the reason I remember that very particularly is because I remember being in my first-year college journalism class for radio arts and entertainment at BCIT, and I was making the thumbnail for this Jesse Puljujarvi video in class, and I, come to think of it, probably should have been paying attention to my professor in class that day, but as I did with most of my college courses in 2018-2019, I was on my laptop making thumbnails and doing research for videos while I was supposed to be listening and taking down notes for lectures and stuff. This Jesse Puljujarvi thing was so old, and I literally remember talking about this all the way back then. Anyways, the idea of Puljujarvi getting traded over to Montreal, there are a few other guys that you could say are interesting names too. Anthony Beauvillier stands out in my mind. Imagine taking yet another former Vancouver Canuck winger, from Tyler Toffoli to Tanner Pearson to Anthony Beauvillier. It would just never stop for this Montreal Canadiens team. Ultimately, though, there isn't really any other name that I think is super good in terms of getting a guy or two from Pittsburgh in Montreal. I think all the other trade ideas that could realistically be discussed would be, Montreal sending a depth forward over to Pittsburgh, and the Penguins sending over an expiring contract for Montreal with a draft pick or something, like Yoel Armia for, I don't know, Puljujarvi in a 7th or a 6th or something. Unless you wanted to go absolutely balls to the wall crazy and say, okay, how about Sidney Crosby? How about Chris Letang? How about these names? Because Darren Dreger says that there could be a Montreal and Pittsburgh trade coming soon. Why not swing for the big fish? Obviously, that big fish is probably not going to come true in any sort of a trade capacity, but there still is a fun idea that you could toss out there, because we have made videos about those ideas too. Hey, don't blame me, y'all watch these videos all the time, so I kind of get the idea that y'all want to talk about these things. So, for Darren Dreger to go out there and speak out about Montreal and Pittsburgh as trade targets, and also even use Kyle Dubas and his posse as evidence here, saying that the Penguins have been scouting the Canadiens pretty heavily here, you have to start thinking, what kind of names would Montreal be interested in sending over to Pittsburgh? If you want to just talk about expiring contracts on the Habs, you want to talk about guys that could help out a Penguins team in some sort of a playoff push. And I say playoff push and not playoff run, because I'm not necessarily too sure if the Penguins are going to do all too hot this season anyway. But who's to say a Christian Dvorak or a Yoel Armia would not actually be an interesting enough addition to a Pittsburgh Penguins team? Who's to say they wouldn't be able to help them out? Now, I get it. It's kind of counterintuitive, because it's like, okay, if you're trading away Yoel Armia for like a Jesse Puljujarvi or something, you're not really improving your team too much. I mean, Puljujarvi is worse, I would say, than Yoel Armia in terms of an overall holistic skill set, but there still is some potential, I would say, that you could say exists and might be able to up the value of a JP, so who really knows? Anyways, if you want to talk about trades, let me know in the comment section, what do you feel about this entire idea here? Darren Dreger linking Montreal and Pittsburgh in some sort of a transaction. What are your thoughts on the names we had discussed? Do you think Drew O'Connor or Beauvillier or Gritslick or Marcus Pettersson would be an interesting fit for Montreal? I'm saying Jesse Puljujarvi, but I'm saying that mostly for the memes, because having Laine, Puljujarvi, and Dubois all get linked to Montreal in the span of a few months and years is just so ridiculous to me. And if you had said to anybody back in 2016, hey, one day Laine and Puljujarvi are going to be on the same team, they would have pulled all their hair out. They would have been like, wait, what? That team is going to be stacked. And then you would have been like, yeah, no, it gets even crazier, because that same team that has Laine and Puljujarvi, they're also going to have Kirby Dach, and they're also going to have Cole Caulfield, and they're also going to have a first overall pick in 2022, and you're going to be like, wow, they must be amazing. And then it's like, no, the Montreal Canadiens are last in the East, and Jesse Puljujarvi, it's not like that guy's going to necessarily change that, but still. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about this entire idea? Do you think Puljujarvi could be a target? I'm just tossing his name out there because he fits the description of what Darren Dreger was talking about. Let me know in the comment section below, how do you feel about JP and the Habs? I hope you enjoyed this video. 9 and bye.